Yes, local economic development is an integrated bottom-up approach. It may seem similar to what was known as community development, but there are very important differences. On the one hand, local economic development is not just inward-looking. It is rather more outward-looking in the sense that it looks at what is happening globally, and it draws its opportunities and challenges from globalization. That is one point that is very different from community development. On the other hand, is not isolating itself and its territory, vice versa, national policies. On the contrary, local economic development is, on the one hand, informing national policies, but also complementing national policies, where it is just easier to work at the local or subnational level. Local economic development as an approach makes more sense, but should never be completely detached from what is national policy. Very important in this, as I said, bottom-up approach is, on the one hand, the territory. So one always needs to define a territory where you find then also stakeholders. And when we talk about stakeholders, we talk about traditional social partners, workers, employers' organizations, the government, the local government, but then also what we can call non-traditional partners that might be any kind of organization, any kind of institution that is working at the territorial level. So although we talk about local economic development, once local stakeholders are mapped out on the territory, it becomes very clear that it's not just about economics, but it's also about social and environmental dimension. Now, talking about migration in local economic development, I would first of all distinguish on the one hand those territories that may suffer important brain drain, and thus people may leave the territories. On the other hand, there are those territories who receive. What is the advantage of an EMLD approach in the first case? In the first case, it is always very important to look at the territory and to understand why certain people, usually young people, do leave the territory. And in many cases, this depends on some issues that are due to a system that does not work. And this system many times is the lack of communication between the human resources system or the human resources that exist on the territory and the enterprise system that is on the territory. Many times those two systems do not communicate, and when I talk about the human resource system, I talk about schools, I talk about the training vocational system, I talk about universities. They do have programs that do not respond to the real needs of enterprises. So many times is that maybe young people are really well trained, they have interesting university studies, but they cannot find anything on a territory. Let's say, for example, a rural territory. So once a young person has studied, is trained, many times the person has to leave and go to either a bigger city or to go abroad. So the problem here is the kind of training, the kind of education that is being offered on a territory should be matched. And here I think this is very important. There should be a dialogue between the education training system and the enterprises, so that they can jointly define the curricula, in order to prevent also from this brain drain, that means from people leaving the territory. Of course, not all territories are the same, and opportunities have to be identified. The LED approach and this dialogue among social and economic stakeholders on the territory many times offers the opportunity to find new economic and social opportunities that cannot be uncovered by national policies. Very important here is the intersectoral approach. That means how can I find new opportunities by looking not just at sectors, but also at the opportunities that may come up, the innovations that may come up between sectors. Just an example, in rural areas, we find more and more examples of opportunities that come up between agriculture and tourism, agriculture and certain services. For instance, caring for elderly, caring or educating kids in agricultural environments, and so on and so forth. So intersectoral approach is very important. Let's go to those territories that receive. In the receiving territories, it is important to find a way of analyzing, let's say again, who is really who are the main stakeholders, and if I have a territory where there are many migrants arriving, one needs to find a way of representing those migrants and giving them a voice. LED, in fact, is a lot about dialogue, is a lot about giving a voice and organizing also those people, those stakeholders that otherwise would just not have a way of expressing their needs and of expressing also what they think as what they see as opportunities. So inclusiveness is a very important element of LED. Here we can also talk about inclusiveness in terms of representing women properly in the territory. That would be via women organization, via self-help groups, maybe cooperatives, and so on and so forth.